If someone's been abandoned as a child, the hard work is to be self-aware when the slightest feelings of abandonment come.
Mm.
They can come with a friend not inviting you to the ball game, somebody forgetting your birthday. It's when you feel like the third wheel, but it gets extreme,
Mm.
and so that can cause you to overreact and make sure that your kid knows that you will never abandon him or her, which is really bad because they're going to have to face some things on their own in life,
Right.
and you're not going to be here
Mm.
most likely for their whole life.
Welcome back to the Today Counts Show with Jim Piper. Be sure to subscribe and follow the Today Counts Show on whatever platform you watch or listen. All right, let's get back to the podcast.
Welcome to the Today Count Show. My name is Winston. I'm joined with Jim Piper. We are here kicking off another episode. And the last time we talked, we had a conversation about parenting. We touched on gentle parenting. And I personally got, some feedback. People felt like we left a little bit on the table. And so we're going to revisit something that you introduced in that podcast, which was the 5 P's related to parenting. But I want to speak to those that, maybe are listening or watching. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, that these P's are principles that can not just be related to parenting, but relationships in general. So maybe if you're not a parent, don't tune off, don't disconnect because there might be some transferable, gold here, if you will, that you could, use in, most relationships. But we are going to be speaking specifically to those who are currently parents, or maybe you're preparing to be a parent, maybe even grandparents.
Grandparents, yeah,
Grandparents as well. And
for
so,
sure.
so let us know, Jim, what are these 5 P's that the people want this? The people want the 5 P's.
Yeah, for those who were with us last time, I kind of threw those out, and I guess the idea is I was going back to when I felt like I needed some more wisdom, I needed some guidance, and I shared that John Maxwell, that's a name that most people have heard of and know, but when he was a pastor, he shared a message. I think it was on Father's Day, and something like being a winning dad or whatever. And I don't remember if he used P's or T's or whatever they were, but I remember he shared 3 or 4, principles that really helped me. And then as I was pastoring, I realized how practical and helpful those those principles were. And I thought, if I follow those principles, um, and evaluate my parenting, my marriage, and how we're approaching raising our 2 kids, it might help. And those 5 that I've been using is prepare, praise, play, protect, and pray.
Mm.
Were meant to, here's the categories, here's the fundamentals, here's the
Yeah.
principles, whatever you want to say, and then what do I do with each of those, and how do I evaluate my parenting with those, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, for somebody who's listening or watching, think about this question. What could your life look like if you had some fundamentals, if you had some principles, if you had some handlebars for parenting? Maybe you're in a place where, man, you just feel like you're winging it. You're just trying your best, but you're just not quite sure what to do or how to do it. Maybe didn't have the best example, or your dynamics are different. And I would just ask you that question, what could your life look like if you had some frameworks that you could use for your parenting? I believe you would probably have some more confidence. You would probably have, a direction that you felt like you were aiming for, some kind of standard or expectation. I think that's what these 5 P's do, correct?
Yeah. They help you organize your emotions, really, and put them in a place where you can be more objective. If that helps, it calms you down as a parent. It gives you a playbook. I don't know why I didn't think of that term before.
Sir.
It's a playbook that we can use for parenting. And
Another P.
Yeah. And I always start off with prepare because, to me, that is the main main concept of each one.
And when we talk about preparation, I mean that can mean a lot of things, right? That's a broad term. When we talk about parenting, how are you thinking preparation works for a parent and a kid relationship?
Yeah. Well, I go back. Well, let me start off by saying this. When I work with business leaders, one of the things that I like to encourage them to do, because of all the stress and the difficulty and the grenades going off, the fires that they're fighting, because they'll push back on me on reading this book or that book, because do I have time to do all that? After all, I have a family, I have a job, I've got kids and whatever. So one of the other things that I've encouraged them to do is take the book of Proverbs, which is in your Bible, almost around the middle of your Bible, has 31 chapters in it. And most months have 30 days, give or take. February doesn't. Some have a little bit more, or I should say, 31 days. Some will have. And if they'll read a chapter, which I'm not sure how long a chapter takes to read, 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Pretty easy read.
Yeah, pretty easy read. Especially if they get a translation that's easier to understand, like the NLT, the New Living Translation. I think over time they're going to build up a lot of wisdom and principles. So, for example, to your question, one of the proverbs says, "Train up a child in the way he or she should go, and when he gets older, he or she will not depart from it." And if I can unpack that a little bit, the first, because you're reading it out of the Bible, you're thinking, oh, this must be about spiritual matters, moral matters, certainly. But it's even more than that. It's a text that reminds you to pay attention. Notice the way your child is bent. What are they good at? What are they not good at? Don't try to encourage them to be somebody that God didn't make them to be.
Okay, you just touched a nerve there, because
Okay.
I've been recently meditating on this idea that I think I grew up with. Most people in America probably have grown up with this. Let's call it a theology, if you will. This mindset that you can be anything you want to be. When you grow up, Winston, you can be anything you want to be. I've heard that so many times. We see that in movies. It's almost like this expectation that a parent should tell their kids they can be anything that they want to be. Why is that dangerous?
Well, it sounds great, right? In fact, I was listening to a podcast this morning on my run. Run is an exaggeration. On my fast walking, jogging sometimes. And I was listening to a podcast where when Barack Obama became the president of the United States, it really did encourage a lot of Black America and thinking, hey, that barrier
Is broken.
has been broken, and maybe someday I can be the president of the United States. So, I mean, we certainly want to encourage our kids to great aspirations. But if we just back up just a little bit, use a little bit of common sense, if they have the aptitude. Now, for example, maybe they're really good at painting pictures, but they have the aptitude to be, let's just say, a doctor. Well, yeah, I would encourage them to really take a hard look at being a doctor if that seems interesting to them. But aptitude alone would not be enough. They're going to want to find themselves in a way of life that best fits them. And there's all kinds of reasons why it may or not fit them. Aptitude is just one. Interest is another. I mean, and
that scripture that you mentioned earlier, train up a child in the way they should go. What does that mean practically?
yeah, so obviously, I think obviously meaning that we're reading it out of the Bible. That's what I mean by obviously. It definitely has religious overtones to it. But what I think is funny about humans is we put religion in one box and practical things in the other box as if they're separate, and they're not separate. So I would say, instead of religious, I'd say it has moral connotations to it. What is right, what is wrong. It would also assume that you're going to be teaching your kids intentionally about a creator. Like I would do as a dad, I would look at the moon and say, who made the moon? Or what I loved the best was I would take their little hands and their fingers when they're really little, said, who made these hands and these fingers? So that would be the part about introducing them into a relationship with God. But the other piece that I was once taught that made a lot of sense to me is that the wisdom of this particular verse that you're referring to, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's older, he will not depart from it, actually comes from a archery idea.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if you go back into ancient days, imagine a stick that looks pretty darn straight, but it's never straight. A stick is never perfectly straight. It has a bend to it. And you got to look, you got to notice, you got to study, because if you're going to turn that stick into a bow, you're going to want to string it, and you're going to want to string it in the direction of its bend.
Mm.
If you try to do it the other way, it's not going to work as well as if you string it in the way that it's bent. So when the joy then of a parent, and I talked about this last time we were together, because I felt like the way you were describing, well, you read the Surgeon General's report about parenting is dangerous to your health.
Parenting is literally a hazard to your health now.
And all the stress that came with it. And I was basically trying to tell you at our last episode is that, you might want to back off of that a little bit, because it sounds to me like you're putting a lot of stress on yourself that you don't need to. I talked about trusting yourself a little bit more, blah, blah, blah. Well, in the spirit of that, if you want to reduce tension, with your kids, because you're going to have tension, right? I mean, they're rebellious. They're rebellious. They're kind of supposed to be, if you think about it. How else are they going to know the boundaries, in life?
That's good.
And they're going to know what's fair, what's foul. And so when you're trying to raise the kids up, have fun noticing who they are. Then you can coach them in that direction versus have this preconceived idea of who they should be based upon your heritage, based upon what maybe you want, or some unrealistic dream that you have. If you reduce the tension in that area, it helps. Now, I'm not saying raise up lazy kids. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying, encourage them to go hard towards their bend, but notice their bend first, which, I don't think that happens in a day.
Yeah. And maybe let's go just a layer deeper, because I think sometimes when we're even speaking in these terms, go hard after your bend, people are superimposing whatever a bend means. And I think part of it is, are we prioritizing the children's character, or, are we prioritizing their skill set? Because I think sometimes we can go past their character to develop their skill set, or to notice their skill set, to notice, man, they're creative, or they're smart, or they're whatever. And we miss the personhood, and that formation of their person is going to influence their skill set.
No, you're nailing it. If we can jump around a little bit on the piece, when we talk about praise, what we want to do is we want to praise the things that are counterintuitive. It is easy to praise somebody for their nice, shiny talent. It's easy to do that. But what effort did they put into that?
God-given.
It's God-given. So instead of quitting the team, instead of throwing the math book across the room, instead of settling for that D, you want to praise them for effort. You want to praise them for hard work. You want to praise them for those kinds of things. That's how you can reinforce that. So, in a sense, all of these pieces have an overlapping qualities, right? But I think that's a very good point. So you notice the bend because that is the shiny piece. But you're absolutely right. If that's all you focus on, you're going to have a spoiled brat on your hands.
And, if we're talking about this preparation idea, can you give me your thoughts on what some might call nepotism, which is a very, negative, has a negative connotation, but maybe even in a positive light, if there's something that, a parent is building, or a family has, or this, this good work that, maybe it's a family business, maybe it's a ministry. Is there anything wrong with seeing the potential in a child to step into something that one's already built up?
No, but I will say it's unusual for it to go well, just in my experience in my lifetime. So that's anecdotal. It's not scientific. But you remind me of a conversation I had with one of my clients a couple weeks ago, and she is building a very successful business. And she told me right out front, because we got talking about that, she is not sure that their kids, and she loves her kids, not sure that they appreciate
Mm.
what it has taken to get the company to where it's at. And that alone might be a disqualifying factor really for anybody, not just a kid, but anybody who is coming into your endeavors. So to be objective, it's really important to really work on interdependence, versus dependence. Have people think objectively. Now, some kids will surprise you because I have seen, I'm thinking of the Gill family. Nobody knows the Gill family, but that's okay. Back in my days in my late teens and early 20s, where I did see an eldest son step in and have the ownership. But the thing was, is he proved himself because he joined the organization and worked himself up through the organization. And it was pretty clear that he was in it for the reasons that you'd be looking for. But generally speaking, I see that not working as much more often than working. So I would say there's nothing wrong with it. Now, obviously, I will say this too. One more thing, because nepotism is a big deal. It's like you can have an org chart, right? And we're supposed to be talking about parents, but we'll dive into business here in a little bit, or ministry, whatever. You can have an org chart, but as soon as the president can be whatever you want it to be, some boss in the organization, um, and their child comes into the organization, even if it's 2 levels down, the culture changes in most cases because they might report to so and so who reports to so and so, but everybody knows that it's the boss's nephew, the boss's son, the boss's
Yeah.
daughter, and that's a dynamic issue. So it takes a lot of integrity and character for a family to be able to do that well. Now, if we're talking about a mobile dog washing business and you want to step into that, go for it. But if we're talking a little bit more complex, yeah, there needs to be a lot of thought into that. Same as living trust and what have you, which now we can get into the financial side of things.
I'm going to jump away from that
Okay,
real
all right,
quick.
let's do that.
But in terms of preparation being one of the 5 P's of parenting here, where do you see the level of importance with family values? In our last podcast, where we were talking about gentle parenting and kind of went not necessarily away from gentle parenting, more than coming away with being an intentional parent, which is what we're talking about. I think there's a level of intentionality required to not just have an expectation of morality or be good people, but actually have unique and intentional values for your family.
Absolutely.
What does that look like?
Yeah, that's really good. When my kids got into their preteens, we realized that even more was at stake. When they were in grade school, there was still all kinds of things that we needed to navigate, but we did a lot of that intuitively. But as they got a little bit older and smarter, and frankly found themselves in a lot of different environments, we turned the heat up. And what I mean by that is we did begin to collaborate a little bit more, but we collaborated from a values perspective, not necessarily a nitpicky, kind of. In fact, I wrote down some things because I knew you were going to ask that question. Let me just give you the quick topics. We wanted to talk about boundaries, which is uh, could actually be communicated better as the kids, started moving towards that fourth grade, fifth grade, et cetera, years. And we also discussed about what happens when we go outside of those boundaries. And we actually had, some collaboration on that as they got older. We talked a lot about reaping and sowing. Though it was hard for us because we do come from the helicopter, parenting generation. Though it was hard for us, we really worked hard not to rescue our kids from mistakes that they had made.
Can you lean into that? Because I find that there are a lot of parents who are overcorrecting, maybe pains in their past and feeling like maybe their parents weren't there for them or didn't communicate the things that they needed. And so it's almost like they're trying to over shield or, give more information or, just not allowing their children maybe to experience what they need to experience so that they can learn. What does a parent need to do to lean into not leaning in, if that makes sense?
Well, I'll say this. I think there's something positive that comes out of a lot of things that you feel are negative. I'll give you a couple quick stories. I got in a fight as a grade school kid in Tennessee. There was a foul ball. And if you've ever been to a Little League game, I don't know if they still do this, but if you got that foul ball and brought it back to the snack bar, you'd get a free snow cone or something like that.
It's amazing. Let's bring that back. Let's bring that back.
So it was a big deal. And I got to the ball about the same time as this kid that was bigger than me. And we got in a fight over it, right? I mean, we're talking a kid fight. So it's a wrestling match, right? And there might have been a couple, jabs thrown. And there was this circle of people watching us, right? It kind of became the main event because the Little League game must have been pretty boring. And then as I kind of looked up, my dad was in that circle. And I had this thought, Dad, why are you not rescuing me? I'm losing this, this thing. That's one memory, and I'll come back, to the memories again. I remember a time where I got this ticket as a 16-year-old, and I mean, it was a massive ticket, and my dad had to go to court, because I was a minor, but he didn't say much to me. He said, that's going to be a really expensive ticket. And I said, well, do you have any advice? He said, just tell the truth, And I also remember that when my grandfather died, I was probably more capable than my dad thought. And I remember I didn't get to go to his funeral. And that really bothered me. All right. Now I gave you some examples of some things that I think that my dad, in this case, I would have done it differently. So that's the boomerang factor. But when I look back at each of those things, I realized that my dad was truly grieving his father. And he wasn't up to the minute in how should this now affect my son and how should I involve him or not involve him. Looking back at it, it was a very unfair thing for me to say. Now, my dad eventually pulled that kid off of me. And by the way, I did hold on to that ball.
Come on.
And when I asked him about it later, he said, well, enough was enough, but you held on to that pretty well. So he taught me there that he's not going to rescue me out of everything when I want him to, but he's also watching over me.
Right.
And there was some, good things to learn there. I'm kind of repeating myself from the last episode. Become self-aware the best that you can. And if you have these lunges, these urges of emotion, maybe I tell this to a lot of people, and I may have even said it to you before, Winston, but it has helped me. Emotions are powerful. And in the moment, they feel like truth. So what someone taught me to do is, in my mind's eye, take myself, it's out of body experience kind of a thing, take myself, put myself in the middle of the room and walk around myself, kind of looking at myself. You know how you see yourself in a video? That's not how you really thought you were.
Yeah.
And you go, wow, who is that person? But you kind of ask yourself questions like this. Why am I feeling this way? Why are my urges this way? And it doesn't mean that you'll change your mind. You might change your mind. You may not change your mind. But I would just say, work on self-awareness and again, don't overthink things. Some boomerang reactions may not be that bad. And other times you might be overreacting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's I think it's very helpful to even give people permission to feel, right? Because I think sometimes even we feel negative or quote unquote negative emotions, which emotions aren't necessarily negative. They're indicators of reality.
No, they're powerful.
And they're informative if we allow them to be.
Yeah.
But maybe, throughout our context and our environments and our past, we learn that there are certain emotions that we need to shy away from or repress. And I think what you're speaking to is the fact that, man, we have freedom to feel, but not be led by our feelings.
No, that's really good though. If I could just say a couple more things on that. Uh, if someone's been abandoned as a child, the hard work is to be self-aware when the slightest feelings of abandonment come.
Mm,
They can come with a friend not inviting you to the ball game, somebody forgetting your birthday. It's when you feel like the third wheel, but it gets extreme,
mm,
and so that can cause you to overreact and make sure that your kid knows that you will never abandon him or her, which is really bad because they're going to have to face some things on their own in life,
right.
and you're not going to be here
Mm,
most likely for their whole life.
mm,
So that's an example of how the feeling itself isn't wrong. It's a wound.
yeah.
So I mean, a pause here is good, just to think about it, and because the last thing we want to encourage parents, and sometimes encouraging parents, we take a step back from parenting and say, well, wait a second, think about what your values are for parenting, and maybe maybe you're still trying to overcome some of your own wounds,
Mm,
right? But because you're there, the child doesn't have those needs,
mm.
but you're just projecting those on them. I think that's a very possible thing.
And maybe in this space, a value that I don't know if anybody, this is an actual value. I think it's maybe an assumed or an aspiration, but healthy. Let's
Mhm.
be holistically healthy as a family. That being a
Mhm.
value, and a prayer that I've been praying recently as I'm trying to be healthy and pursuing holistic health is, God, reveal my insecurities. God, help me to see where I'm leading and where I'm living out of a place of insecurity. And, how many of us are parenting out of insecurity?
I was on a 30-minute call today with a executive, high-level executive, and we were talking about the importance of, as leaders, not only recognizing our insecurities, but talking about them. And in doing so, we become more secure.
Mm,
And because we all have insecurities, every single one of us. Um, I think that's powerful, Winston. A couple other things. Well, you know what? Before I just tap on these others, I'm not going to go through them unless you have a question about them. But I'm just kind of giving categories under the idea of preparation. You asked me a question earlier that I would say is this way: what's more important? In my own words, I'd say, what's more important: developing their God-given talent, encouraging them in that direction, or developing, their character. And I still haven't shook that question because I think there's two things that you're trying to do. You're trying to first and foremost help them develop their constitution.
mm,
And if you think about the Constitution of the United States, what is that document about? It's describing who we are, what we stand for, and what we believe. And that's exactly what you want to do in parenting. You want to help them first and foremost establish that constitution. We used the term values earlier in this episode. That's exactly now built on that constitution is where you notice the bends, and then you encourage them to go in that way. But when it comes to preparation, I just wanted to add that when it comes to preparation, these are some other things. Work ethic is a family value. It goes way back into our generations of entrepreneurs. One thing I can say about both of my children is they work their butts off, and maybe too much. We're a family that works. Now there could be a downside to that, but um, so far I haven't seen a whole lot because we know how to have fun too. Honoring and respecting others.
mm.
We all have biases. If we say we don't, we're stinking liars and we're already wayward. But as we discover those biases, we need to deal with them and explain why maybe we have them, or explore maybe why we have them. But I really, what I do like about we're in a southern state right now as we're recording this podcast. And at first I was very suspicious about a lot of the yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am that I hear in the southern culture, because you do not hear that in California. I mean, it's like,
Not in New York either.
yeah, a 16-year-old would say to a 40-year-old, "Hey, what's up?" And I'm going, "What? Yeah, come here, I'll show you what's up." You know?
That's the protection piece. We're not there yet.
Okay. Anyway, I just think that, and as I've looked at it more, I'm sure that some of it is just cultural and not authentic, but I have found in a lot of cases it's authentic. So I find it's interesting is that you can actually teach what it looks like on the outside and behavior like yes sir, no sir. And I think some of that sinks in.
Mm.
Not all of it, but some of that sinks in. And then controlling the tongue, um, language, right? Language, finances. We we worked hard to teach our kids about money as early as we could, and to throw one thing out, not just money, but stewardship, stewarding time, stewarding money, stewarding property, taking care of your car, taking care of whatever. So those are just an example of some of the things that we kind of listed under prepare our kids. And one quick one is that winning and losing,
Mm.
um, preparing them that you're going to lose and you're going to win. So what does that look like?
Yeah, you're making me think about. I grew up as an athlete, and you're making me think about participation trophies. Participation trophies, which I mean, literally, I think that was introduced maybe in the '80s, early '90s. There's this culture of man, we're kind of feeling sorry for the kids that aren't winning, and everybody's a winner. We've heard that phrase before. Why is that ideology dangerous?
Yeah, it's funny. I never even knew about that till I was coaching. And those that kind of ran the interior of the organization, when we had the banquet, I was given all these trophies or medals and what have you. And I would ask, all right, did you get my list of who's the MVP, who's the, this or that? And they go, yeah, we have those too. I go, well, what are all these? They said, well, this is for everybody. It goes, it's for everybody. What? So I didn't even know. I didn't even know that until I was asked as a coach to hand those things out. Yeah, I mean, again, like a lot of things that we talked about in gentle parenting, it sounds great because all for one for all. I mean, so in that spirit, I think that's a cool thing. But that's just not how life works. It's not a one for all for one for all, however you say it. That's not the world that you live in. So, because for that reason, and I think that reason alone,
Yeah.
it's enough to say, yeah, I would probably steer away from that. I'd say here's where you got the benefit. You got to participate on the team. You won some, you lost some. You learned how to give high fives. You learned how to be a team player. That's awesome, right there. And you know what? We are going to recognize those that had that work ethic, that never missed practice, that did this. And maybe we are going to recognize the talented kid who scored all the home runs or, whatever. That's kind of how what we do. And maybe we will do the most improved, but whatever the categories are. And, I'm not trying to be the devil here and just say, all right, round up all the participation medals and burn them all. But I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. I think growing up, I don't know if you're really competitive, it's almost disrespectful to give me a second place trophy. I don't want your second place trophy. Give me first, or I'm just not going to play, right? Like, why would I want that? But there is a culture that exists, and I mean that's been previous generations, and I think some of the effects that we've seen, that how that's play out is a level of entitlement.
Yeah.
And expectation. We're seeing that, arguably in, the millennials, but specifically maybe even Gen Z, that, the hit that the workforce has taken, and people expecting a level of care or a level of privilege that they haven't really earned, or they haven't really, to your point about valuing work ethic, haven't really proven themselves to be consistent and trustworthy. And me and my wife were having a conversation the other day, and we know some people that are younger than us, which is crazy because we feel like we're kind of young, but apparently we're not the young kids on the block
No,
anymore.
you're not. I was thinking about asking you for some retirement advice.
Oh man, AARP, man, your boy. I can be a spokesman for you. But this these people that we're aware of, these younger people that we're aware of, have not really built a resume because they've not endured and stayed in environments long enough to kind of show that they have a level of commitment for really anything, right? And so do you think there is a level of entitlement that exists in this generation because of previous um, types of parenting that reinforced everybody wins?
Well, it may come from more than that. It may come from a wave in our national culture. We're North America, or I should be more specific, the United States of America is really different than most of the countries in the world. And of course, capitalism is either loved or hated, as is socialism. And not to get into that too much, but one is simply based upon merit and generosity, and the other is based upon really what you're talking about. And and so when people, it depends what lenses that people are looking through. I mean, the scriptures tell us that if we lend to the poor, we lend to the Lord. We lend to God. But I never find in scripture where we are, well, even in the early church, when in the beginning, when they kind of threw everything into a collective place that could be, given out, to others. I think some well-meaning Christian take that way out of context. There are times that there's a call for incredible generosity. I mean, pandemics, as an example, things that are just crazy, and we all need to do everything that we can. But it seems to me that the construct of human nature and progress is about merit. And maybe I'm a sinner, selfish butthead, but if you and I are on the same team and we're going to get the same paycheck at the end of the year, regardless of whether you sat on your butt all year and I covered for you, yeah, that's not going to go well, for me. And I just wonder why people don't think that out a little bit, farther down the road. Now, if I make all that money for me, and I don't have any room in my heart to help another brother, up, then that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
But here's my issue with that. I don't think that person will continue to be successful because it's not an or, it's always an and. It's always and. In fact, I read an article the other day that comes from a study I think Gallup did. They said that they've noticed, first of all, and this sounds really simple, but they noticed that, first of all, successful people, however you want to define that, they have a desire, they have an appetite to win. They have an appetite to win, whether it's monopoly, basketball, or business, or ministry, or whatever it is. They have an appetite to win. And you know what comes right after that? An appetite to give.
Mm.
So winning becomes the means to sharing. That's what the studies reveal. It's funny too, if you think about some of the biggest names, and not all of them, but some of the biggest names who have become billionaires. One of the things that they've been working on once they've reached those places, how to give it away. But they're wise people. Going back to what you said in the beginning, they know that they just can't give it to their kids. They know they can't just give it to anybody that's earned it. So they give it into foundations that have clear missions that are attached to performance. And so it's not I mean, I think as parents, we need to realize that we're teaching worldview more than we realize.
That's good.
Yeah. And the way to change the world is, raise up really good kids. It's hard work. Don't be a jerk to yourself in the process.
we've kind of unintentionally slipped into one of the P's, which is praise. This
Yeah.
is kind of we're on the other side of praise, the downside of kind of just praising participation versus praise and intentionality. Speak to that other side of praise. You touched on it a little bit, speaking to the character versus the skill set, but what else is under that umbrella of praising our children appropriately?
Yeah, I'll give you a really good example. This is my parents get credit for this. My mother does not quit, and my father does not quit. They modeled that. I don't know that they really gave me very many lectures about sticking with things. I just think it was part of our culture. So anyway, I played flag football and I liked football. And when I got to high school, even though I might have been a buck 30 when I started playing, and I kind of felt like David putting on Saul's armor, the stuff didn't fit me or whatever. And my first year of football, I think I got into like 3 plays all season, 3 plays. Um, one play I almost got knocked out. Another play I got to run the ball, and but I went to every practice. I went to Hell Week. I never missed a practice. I never missed a game. I went through all that. I went through all that season, mostly being a bench warmer. When I say mostly, I'm talking 99% of the opportunity I sat on the bench. Now, I didn't think anything of it because it's just how I was raised. Looking back at it, Winston, looking back at it, I wasn't sitting there consciously saying, I'm a bench warmer, but I'm going to go ahead and finish out the season.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a young man of character. No, I didn't think any of that. In fact, I'm sure I was very irritated that I didn't get more,
Playing time.
and what was amazing is, how at the end of the year you get your a yearbook, and you hand your yearbook around and people sign it. And we still have that in the house. If I were to go get that right now, I could show you how many football players wrote in there things that they never spoke to me, they never said to me, but they all honored, they were amazed by that I started with the team and I ended with the team, even though I never got to play. And I didn't even knew that I was really doing that. I was just doing that. I think that's the power that parents have, but on the praise side, I would just stick with what I said earlier. The main staple on that is think about what you're praising them for. Because if you want to make a winner, somebody that's persevering, focus on those kinds of things. And if they win things too easy, I don't say you don't acknowledge it. You say, man, you're really gifted in that area. But I would focus on the Constitution.
Yeah. I've heard it said, what's celebrated gets repeated. What's celebrated gets repeated, and we want to make sure we're celebrating the right things in our children, and maybe just a little bit more in this praise area. But if maybe we have a child that things come easy, gifting, whatever that might be, how do we, in that vein of train up a child in the way they should go, how do we maybe add some intentional resistance or some challenges? How do we stretch them within reason to help develop, some of those muscles?
Yeah, for kids that are really talented, a lot of times it's just learning how to say I'm sorry.
Wow.
To their teacher, to their friend, to see where they were wrong, learn how to articulate, that. Because the thing you have to remember, and this is an old story, it's repeated all the time. How many kids with great promise in sports get severely injured, but their whole identity is, in that. I tell this to a lot of my friends, but I would teach from the pulpit for decades. And when I moved away from that to focus on the leadership ministry, I didn't recognize it right away, but I found that my identity was wrapped up in the pulpit. And I was a grown man. I was 48 years old when I started moving in another direction. And it's really amazing how what you do gets wrapped up in your identity. And if you're good at it and you get praise for it, and then that praise stops because you stop doing it, who are you? So, wouldn't it be better if we raise salt of the earth, kind of people? I love it when I hear people say, I have a friend who says about my parents all the time. He says, your mom and dad, those are good people.
Hmm.
And we know what he means by that, and they are good people. We want to raise good people, right?
Yeah.
And so, like saying you're sorry, admitting that you're wrong. I mean, no matter how shameful the, because those who are talented are most susceptible to cheat
Wow.
in every way, because they haven't really. And another thing that you'll notice, and maybe you've noticed this in sports, maybe you've noticed that you've had a kid walk on the hardwood and he was just natural.
Yep.
Tell me if I'm wrong, because it was at least true for me. I'm amazed how many of them had a low glass ceiling, because once it got hard, it was always somebody else's fault.
Yep.
And many of them just disappeared. They quit.
That's exactly true. They never learned, back to your point, they never learned how to lose.
Yeah.
They never learned how to submit to authority. They never learned how to be coached. And those are character things. Nothing to do with skill set. It was however their character was formed, and back to intentionality. Whoever their guardian was, whoever their parent was, more than likely there was no intentionality about discipline, about to what you're talking about. Things that seem simple in a child's life, helping them understand, why don't we do this? Right. I'm raising a 3-year-old girl right now, and one of the things we're working on with her, I mean, she seems to be gifted. She seems to be advanced. We're able to, pretty much have a conversation at this age right now, which is crazy. And when she does something wrong, I'm trying to get her to verbalize, what did you do that was wrong? Why was that wrong? And we'll get to the point where she can communicate everything but what she did. And she's like, I'm just thinking is kind of her phrase. I'm like, no, you know what you did. Say what you did. And she just won't confess. She won't speak to
I
it.
have one phone call. I get one phone call.
She's like, phone a friend. And I think it's exactly what you're talking about. Those people who never learn how to confess, they grow up to be the ones that fade away.
I saw a dad on a video, and I believe it was authentic, that the young person didn't know that I think it was by accident that it was being recorded, but the dad actually got the kid to admit that the reason why he was sad for his punishment was he was sad about the punishment and not in himself. He wasn't disappointed in himself, but what the dad was trying to say, why are you crying? Are you crying because you don't like the punishment, or are you crying because you did something bad? And the boy, confessed, I'm crying because I don't like the punishment. Well, it's the wrong answer, but at least it's a start, and it bothers us if we think that our kids are liars. I'll just say to the parents, your kid is a liar, and that's part of growing up. First, they got to tell the truth to themselves. When you start seeing them do that, and then wow, that's a powerful thing. But don't get freaked out when they lie to you, even if you saw them do it and they know that if they know you saw them do it and they still lie. That's the thing that used to always crack me up. Okay, I just want you to understand before you answer my question, I saw you do it, right? I'm
They still just, no, I didn't do it.
Nope, I didn't do it. You must be seeing things.
It wasn't me. And you don't have to teach them that. You don't even
Yeah.
have to teach them that. If we jump into, something that I really don't think many parents, put emphasis on, but one of your P's is play. Unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think you have to go to the playground and do everything with them all the time. But some of my fondest memories that made my my dad specifically relatable is he did like playing with us. And I don't just mean ball. He played ball, with us. But we would play army, right? And we used to live in the mountains, and so half of us would go this way, half of us would go that way. And And my dad at times, our roof, because you live in the mountains, your lots are not always flat, and so sometimes where your roof ends on your house is only like maybe 5 feet, from the ground.
Mm.
But it wouldn't be. I My dad would sometimes hide on the roof,
Wow.
and then when we're coming, we'd come around. All of a sudden, he'd jump, down on us and scare us to death, and play hide and go seek, and all of those kinds of things. It brought laughter, and he played ping pong, with me. I have some of my best memories playing ping pong with my dad in the summer till midnight, and we would sweat, in the garage and just play and play and play. And of course, the kids in my neighborhood thought he was a hero because he was the only dad out there, and he would play, quarterback for both teams and that kind of a thing. I guess the play principle probably comes more from what is hard to articulate, but I think it was part of what provided safety.
Mm.
That he wasn't just an authority figure.
Mm.
Um, because when Dad says it's time to go in, we might have said, "Oh, one more, one more touchdown, one more," but he knew how to turn the dial into, okay, no, now it's time to go and shower up, get ready. But I have found that to be kind of a secret.
That's a powerful secret, because I think what being intentional about play, around the formation of our child's personhood forces us to do. Play forces us to be present. Play forces us to be present. I would argue that you can't be distracted and be able to genuinely play and have fun with your children. And as I'm, once again, parenting a 3-year-old, soon to be baby girl on the way as well. And as I'm playing, and as we're, she has this kitchen set that she makes food for
Oh yeah,
me,
I remember those.
and she's, what do you want to order? And I'm, ordering this. And what's beautiful in those moments is it forces me to slow down.
Yeah.
Like I literally have to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else matters. If I'm engaging with her,
Mm-hmm.
nothing else matters but seeing her whip up the little, the fake sandwich, or whatever she's putting together. And man, one, that blesses me to be able to just literally disengage from, the realities that, I'm connected to, and just really have those just moments of gratitude is what it produces. Like, man, I really, man, I'm blessed to have this child that wants to play with me, that desires to spend time with me. And then I think about my own personal faith journey and how formative it is to be in my father's presence.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good.
And just to slow down enough to not, I'm not talking about just like, a list of God help me with all these things. I'm just enjoying being in the presence of a God who, he doesn't have to love me.
Well, maybe even enjoying the concept that he's enjoying watching you do good. And almost like look up to heaven and say, "Hey, that was good, huh, Father? That was good, huh, Lord? That was good." Well, I think laughter is the idea that we're getting after here because, as you know, our family has a annual holiday football game, and we're not ready for ESPN.
I hear it gets pretty intense though.
It does, but there's laughter and high fives. It's just like when I play golf with my boys and someone hits a drive right down the middle, 250 yards, high five. I mean, it's family is stressful.
Mm.
And like you pointed out, that I often say love is pain, and it's work, and it's serious, and it's this and it's that. Well, doggone it, man, you got to make sure that you get some play in there and some laughter, that you're in this, together. Those are really important memories too.
Yeah, I find that, even just the smallest intentional word, spoken to my daughter, she carries that. She
Mhm.
remembers that, and it's just a strong reminder for me about how much intentionality and presence is going to help. It's part of that training up a child. It's formative for them. Another P that you have here is protect, and I think when we hear the word protect, especially men, right? We get to the physical space. We think about, being the tough guy and being able to fight and, protect our family and die for our family, which are all real things, and that's one part of it. But what's the other side of protection?
Yeah. Just before I dive into that, I want to say one more thing about praise. You're actually, it's your fault that we have to go back because you made me think of something that's really important. Praise also in the form of speaking um, prophetic
Mm,
ideas over your kids is praise. And I think my family would tell you I do that often. I tell my son he's a really good dad. I tell Greg, my son, through marriage, he's a really good dad. They both are. They're both really good dads, and I so particularly in the hard things,
mm-mm,
in
mm-mm,
life. All right,
mhm.
so
Wait. I have to now it's your
okay,
fault
okay,
because I was recently at a leadership leadership conference, whatever you want to call it. And there was this story told. There was this leader sharing. It was a parenting session, and they were sharing about how to parent through hard times when your kids aren't on the path that we think they should
yeah,
be. And they shared this story, where they walked into an environment where it was obvious that their child wasn't participating in a lifestyle that they approved of, and the natural response was to speak directly to the fact that they were doing something wrong. But instead of speaking to the specifics of what they were doing, they spoke to their personhood,
mm,
and they chose to say, man, God has great plans for your life, and this is not going to get you there.
mm-hmm,
And I just
mm-hmm.
walked away thinking that was so powerful, that our nature is to speak specifically to the wrong thing. And though we need to, there's space for that. But how much more important is it for us to prioritize speaking once again to their character, into their future, into the God-given things that they have, versus the activity itself?
I agree with you 100%. I think where we just kind of cut praise short is we wanted to make the point that you don't want praise to be empty, and we wanted to
Mm,
drive that point home. But at the same time, I think we might have skipped over, the real power of speaking positive things into our kids' lives. And like I said, my kids are older than you are, and I find that doesn't stop.
mm.
But I still want to be selective as to, what I pick out. All right. So you asked me about,
Protection.
yeah, protection. I want to read you a text out of Proverbs, and in Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 7, it says, "Don't let the second word intimidate you." Okay, it says, "The godly walk with integrity." Then there's a semicolon, and it says, "Blessed are their children after them." I think some of the things that we forget as we wrestle through this life is that when we work hard to live a life of integrity, you're not, just as we often say, you can't contain sin in yourself. It spreads. But the same is true with integrity. You can't contain it.
That's
It
good.
it spreads to your kids. So one of the ways that you can protect your kids is to be that model for them, not just in front of them, but do the hard things. And when you're struggling, doing the hard things. So that's one of them. Last time we talked about another one, which is make marriage your number one priority. That is how you protect them. Um, uh, don't just say it. I think you do need to say it, but make sure that they feel it, that your home is safe. Your home is safe. And if there are times where it feels unsafe, you need to work hard at bringing that back. Um, letting the kids know that, yeah, the argument got out of control.
Mm,
It was unbecoming, or pick a whatever the right language is for the age of the kid. It's unbecoming. It wasn't right. Model for model confession, model reconciliation,
that's good.
and that creates safety from a world that has perfect, incredibly impossible expectations, and it brings grace into that. Here's another one. Um, So anyway, make sure your home's a safe zone. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It just means that we're consistent about what we do. We make sure that the kids know that we're sinners too.
Mm,
Um, we don't act flippantly about it, but it really should be something very significant. It's amazing the empathy that you'll see that come from kids,
mm.
which always reminds me I don't have enough empathy.
And that's what Jesus probably tells us to be childlike.
I think so, right? I think so. They believed easy and they forgive easy,
Mhm.
right? And that's what some of that we need to not let the world mess up. But here's what I mean specifically. Some of these are going to be in your face. You got to protect them from making stupid choices. Like, no, you're going to be involved in helping them pick their friends,
Mm.
especially at certain ages.
Say it again.
You're going to be involved in choosing their friends. And no, until that glorious age, whatever it is, our culture says it's 18. To me, it's somewhere around 40. Uh, we want to help them avoid stupid choices that they just don't have the experience with. And we talked about stranger danger. I know that gentle parenting probably is all over that, I would imagine. But these other things like social media, I didn't have to deal with that when I was a dad. I had to deal with the television. I had to deal with the playground language, maybe a bully around the corner, those kinds of things. The politics and little league or whatnot, those kinds of things. Um, and it all looks different from one age, to another. And then you asked me about this last time, and I'll just touch on it real quick. Whoever you are partnering with to raise your kids, because you are partnering with different people and institutions, man, set the bar high. Set the bar high and make sure that that is a nutrient, not the highway. We as parents are the highway, and we appreciate the coach and the teacher and the Sunday school teacher and the counselor and whomever, and even good media. We appreciate all of those things, but we need to be the ones who monitor and disperse those at the right level and appropriately. And I have to go back one more thing before we get to the last P. Is I really appreciated what you said in our last episode about, man, it sounds like a lot of hard work. I think that I tell you what, I'm going to save that to we're getting closer to the end, but I want to save what I was just about to say towards the end.
Okay. Real quickly, you touched on, who we're partnering with to raise our children. And, we're all, flawed human beings. We have, different backgrounds, different experiences. And so there often is a tension of, coming into alignment and maybe uncommunicated expectations. We kind of touched on that last time, but when a mom and a dad, when a husband and a wife find themselves stuck in how to move forward with their kids, what would you say to parents who feel stuck
Yeah.
about raising up their children?
Yeah, I'll say the same thing I say to young leaders, young VPs, young entrepreneurs, is one of the, in fact, there's a chapter in my next book that I'm working on. And right now it is called The Inner Circle because that is the topic. I think one thing that separates folks who continue to move forward versus that end up in the ditch for a while. Now we all end up in the ditch, but they end up in the ditch and they can't seem to get out. Is those that are always building an inner circle, and what I call it your private board of directors. People that you can trust, and this is something you have to be intentional about. Everybody's busy, the world is busy, everyone's got priorities, but there are good people out there, and you do have to show yourself. I have a lot of people say, Jim, will you mentor me this, mentor me that, and I'll test them.
Mm.
And they fail most of the times. They don't want to be mentored, because that's a sincere that's a sincere proposition. It takes my time, it takes my emotions, my investment, in them, because if you're going to ask me to mentor, then okay. I would say that's a proactive thing that they should do now. So if parenting's going pretty well, wonderful, but you better get ready,
Mm.
so go ahead and notice folks, especially if you can come up with mentors who aren't going to just tell you what to do, but they can share their stories with you. I talked to a young executive today, and I said, what do you think your big brother would tell you right now? What do you think your dad would tell you right now? What do you think your grandfather would tell you right now?"
Mm.
And all three of them would have different perspectives. And being respectful to all, which one would you tend to want to hear the most from? And I think it's, that person that has grown older and has settled down a little bit in their ego. There's a lot of richness, and the Proverbs speak about that as well. Now, not every elderly person is wise, but a lot of them are. And by elderly, I mean, if you're 20 and somebody's 40, well, there you go. That's your elderly.
I'm elderly for somebody.
You are. You are. And you probably have been asked to mentor others. I know you have. But that would be, the main thing is that community that you can call. Sometimes, and I know this is going to sound really weird and maybe hurtful, you're going to probably have a sprinkle of family in there, but a lot of times you're not, because it's hard for family to be objective.
That's good.
Right? That's just a practical thing. If in the middle of this podcast right now, I were to get a 911 text that isn't life or death, but it's something that's troubling, I will tell you right now, I'd get up and leave. And it may be an overreaction. I'm just, at first, my emotions are not objective, and I will react. And that's why sometimes we don't like Thanksgiving and sometimes we do, is because families tend to be very reactive. Now, they love and that they care, but if you're looking for some advice and not a lecture, then you might want to work on this inner circle.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And I think there's so much left on the table when we try to go at it alone. Whether it's just our own personal life, but specifically parenting, and there's such power in community. I know there's an old adage, right? It takes a village to raise a child. And I think the thing that we don't grasp oftentimes is that we're responsible to build that village. And we just hope it kind of happens organically. Like we're going to bump into somebody at HEB and it's going to be like, "Do you have kids?" "I have kids. I think we just became best friends. Do you want to?" And it's like, no, I need to have values.
Mm-hmm.
I need to understand the type of people I want to put around me. And I have to understand the dynamics of my family. What do I need? And those are going to be markers and indicators, because some people might be watching this or listening and asking, how do I even build my community? Well, you kind of have to have a target. You got to have an aim.
And
right?
most likely it's going to be slow and frustrating. And so, I would encourage those that are, I still am constantly working on my inner circle. And I'm going to be 65 in March, and I have players leave, players come, for a variety of reasons. When I was younger, if kind of to your HEB, the grocery store here in San Antonio that you're talking about, we're so eager for some things that we just welcome them in. And then, we get 3 months in, we said, "Oh my gosh, how do we break up with this couple?" Or whatever. So as much as enthusiasm I've given you about building the inner circle, also know that it should be slow and it will be frustrating. You're not looking for perfection in that. Sometimes you have to look at it. What does this mentor provide? They might have flaws that are really obvious in other areas, but they can really provide some help in an area. Even parenting itself has many facets, right? So somebody might be able to help with certain things. So you have a special needs child, for example, you probably should have mentors who have experience with that, right?
Yep.
That would be an example.
All right. Well, let's land the plane with the last P, which is prayer.
Yeah. This one won't take long because it's somewhat obvious. But whenever I teach, I always try to think of the most important thing last. And to me, this is the most important. And so, in my notes, I wrote down these 3 ideas: pray for, pray with, and pray in front of.
Mm.
Pray for, when you pray for your kids, you work hard at taking the subconscious worry that's always on, and you bring it to the forefront of your consciousness, meaning that you know you're not in this alone. And then you remind it through that process that, oh yeah, like we said last time, that little Johnny is not yours, he's mine. And you feel like, okay, there's partnership. Pray with, of course, is teaching them how without saying, hey Johnny, I want to teach you how to pray. But when you just pray with them, and you'll be surprised if you keep asking them, is there anything that you would like to talk to God about together? Sooner or later, they'll surprise you. They'll say, well, there's this kid at school, or, someone stole my stuffy, or, whatever. And that's an important part. Now, this one may sound kind of weird, but I'm not saying you should stage it, but when your kids see you praying for things other than the meal, other than the good night prayer, and they see you on your knees wrestling with God, that will leave an impression. Now, again, if you fake it, you're probably missing the spirit, of the
Yeah.
whole thing. But I wouldn't hide your spiritual life. Might be private to some degree, but it's certainly shouldn't be private to your kids.
Yeah, and I can speak to this in real time. My limited experience as a parent, but in real time, me and my wife have if you want to say, made prayer and faith a value in our family. And we got a text message recently. We're sitting in a parking lot, just came from shopping or something, and we got a text message that a friend was sick, and our daughter's in the back seat, and I just made a decision. Hey, let's pray out loud for this person.
Yes.
And so, I'm praying, and my daughter's kind of in the back seat, and she's, seen us in different contexts, pray, and understands, at church we pray. And so she's kind of just taking it in. And, we try to, invite her to participate by finishing up the prayer, like, amen. And, she says amen. But what's been cool about stuff like that is seeing her then take initiative, and, seemingly random, but, she'll, in her own way, ask to pray for somebody. And though it might, somewhat be gibberish, there's a heart desire
Sure.
to respond to what we're doing.
Mhm.
And it's because we're modeling it. We're being intentional about it.
And she's learning in her subconscious, at least, that she belongs.
Mm. What do you mean?
Well, that though she has a mommy and a daddy, that she even belongs to something bigger than that.
Mm.
That she has a father in heaven, somebody that she can go to.
That's good.
I mean, think how powerful that is if God forbid she were to lose her mommy or her daddy. I mean, that's a powerful thing. Which, at my age now, I'm praying for my grandkids' spouses, and I'm praying for their children. And you may say, well, you don't even know them. Why would you do that? But again, prayer is not just what keeps me sane. It has taught me through, especially when I learned it in business. When I learned to integrate prayer in my job as a banker, it changed everything. I think there was a time where I didn't do it consciously, Winston, but subconsciously I did separate my faith from my work. My work is my work. If you're building a fence, you're building a fence, but when I integrated everything through prayer, that was a game changer.
That's huge. That's huge. And man, I think this is a great place to land the plane. The 5 P's of parenting. Once again, whether you're a parent or not, I think these principles, you can contextualize it to your, life and your reality. But hopefully, man, you've taken something away from this conversation. Jim, thank you for dropping some gems on us. This is huge for all those who are man, raising the next generation or the now generation. And so, man, until next time, we love y'all, and we'll see you.